and we're here to discuss climate change and its impact on the mountains. Before we kick off for the panel discussion, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Taungurung people, their elders past and present. And before we dive into the panel, we have an introduction from Daisy about the work of the Junior Alpine, the Duty of Care team. So there's a few acronyms.
Yes.
Welcome, Daisy.
Hi everyone. So my name's Daisy. You're probably not familiar with me or what me and my team do. I'm based in Sydney. My friend Hannah is based in Canberra, and we work on the Duty of Care campaign. So we're working with Independent Senator David Pocock to legislate a duty of care to protect young people and future generations from the impacts of climate change. We started out as a court case in 2020. We successfully sued the government, along with Susan Lee as the Environment Minister. Susan Lee then came back and was successful in her appeal. And so then we started out as legislation, and now we're campaigning to legislate this bill. So our update is basically that we are on a stall if you want to come and have a chat with us about what engaging with the bill looks like, what supporting it looks like. If you're a young person, you're wanting to have a bit of a chat about what participating in political organising can look like and what campaigning on social media can look like. We're just down there. We're really keen for a chat if you want to come and participate. So that's the update from us, and very excited to see this panel today. These wonderful voices and youth voices in particular talking about the impact that climate change is currently having and will continue to have on the mountains.
Thanks so much, Daisy. Next, I'd like to introduce a woman who probably needs no introduction around here, Dr. Helen Haines, independent member for Indi. We're so lucky to have such a terrific person as our local member. She's a midwife, she's a Wangaratta local, she's won several very prestigious awards for integrity in politics, something that the world is in dire need of at the moment, and was indeed central to establishing the National Anti-Corruption Commission. She's also one of the key reasons why I'm still married. When I met my now husband, does he want to wave?
He's right there.
Well, that's embarrassing, Nick. When I met him, I lived in the inner north of Melbourne and I voted Greens. When I told my dad I had met this Liberal voting race car driver, he said, well, that will never work. And then we had Cathy McGowan and Helen Haines become our local member, and we vote the same way, and you cannot believe the amount of arguments that has reduced around election time. Helen, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Lily. Before I get going, there are 4 empty seats up here and a lot of people standing, so how about 4 folks come and sit down and be more comfortable? Lily, there's a lot of things that I try to explain about what I do, but marriage counselling or marriage survival is not one of them. But I'm going to add it to the list. Thanks so much.
Add it to your list.
Look, Lily, thank you for that really lovely introduction. And Daisy, can we just have a huge round of applause for the Duty of Care advice? You know, at times when we're thinking about action on climate change, a lot of people want to hide under their bed, but the Duty of Care guys actually bounced on their beds and bloody well sued the government. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing to do, and when I see the work of young people across our nation, I met with Anjali Sharma recently. I frequently meet with Senator Pocock and see the work of your team. You give me so much energy and so much hope and such momentum to do the work that I can do as an elected member of Parliament to pursue what we need to pursue to not only protect our extraordinary environment, but importantly to do what we must do for the future generations of Australia. So thank you, Daisy. And thank you for the work of Duty of Care. It's extraordinary. Thank you. I want to thank Lily for the work she's about to do here on the panel. Shout out to Scott and all your awesome team here at Bright Brewery. Sam Beaver, where are you, Sam? Yeah, there you are. Sam and Scott and a whole bunch of other people, we met in Parliament maybe a year and a half ago to talk about this campaign, Protect Our Winters. And they came to me with an awesome body of work that had been led by the Australian National University, and they said, Helen, do you reckon you could get a bunch of crossbenchers together to talk more about this? And we did. And then we talked about we need to have an event in our patch, because here in the magnificent electorate of Indi, centred here in what is the jewel of our alpine crown, we know firsthand the impact of global warming on our alpine environments. Whether that be the amount of snow that's falling or not falling, whether that be the impact on our glorious snow gums, whether that be on the little critters that are reliant on our alpine environment to thrive, and whether that be on our tourism economy and the livelihoods of the communities that live in these valleys. We know that this is a critical issue for us to champion, to not only describe a problem, but to come forward with solutions. So part of our job today, Lily, as I understand it, is to be here with this amazing panel, and I've got Zoe and Steve and Ewen here, and you're going to get introductions from them in a moment. But again, I am delighted to be your Member of Parliament. I will never shy away from talking about the issues that deeply matter to us and going into the Parliament courageously with the solutions that we want to see to ensure that we have protecting the environment that we have, but more so that we have an environment that will sustain the future generations of Australians. So thank you, Lily. I'll hand it back to you, and let's get on with this interesting conversation.
Thanks so much, Helen. Now, I'd encourage anyone, if you've got any burning questions, to shout them out as we go along. If you're a bit too rowdy, we'll have you kicked out, but that's a different thing. So, we're meeting at a time when climate action around the world has taken a dent. I know that a lot of people who believe in science and know that the world needs deep and rapid cuts to fossil fuel emissions are feeling a little bit down. As Helen just said, it's amazing that people like Daisy are getting out from under their bed, Daisy, let alone jumping on a bed. Protect Our Winters put out a very, very comprehensive report on the impact that climate change will have on the mountains. It's on the website, you can all read it, but I think I can summarise it quite quickly to say it's not good. We need deep and rapid cuts now. What's positive in that report is that if we take deep and rapid cuts, by 2070 the snow should start coming back. I'll be in my 90s then, and we'll be lucky if I'm still skiing, but I think that my two boys here will be skiing in 2070, and that's certainly something worth fighting for. We have a federal election coming up, and it's a federal election that really matters. Why does it matter? It matters because there's a very good chance that independents like Helen will hold the balance of power and will force the major parties into taking deep and rapid cuts in fossil fuel emissions. It also matters on the world stage because the world is in need of hope, and the Australian election could bring that hope. So, for all of you feeling a little bit tired, I'd ask you to put that tiredness aside, and we expect the federal election to be called any day. Put the tiredness aside, get out from under the bed and do everything you can. And jump on it. Thanks, Tom Tom. Now, for today's panel, we have Zoe Gray. Zoe is a Mount Beauty local. She is a climate activist and she's a Year 12 student. Welcome, Zoe. Next to her, we have Steve Belli. He's the Mount Hotham Chamber of Commerce President and a community advocate. Welcome, Steve. And on the end here, we have Ewen Silvester, also the representation from Mount Beauty is high today, Ewen. I'm also a Mount Beauty local and the director of the Research Centre for Applied Alpine Ecology at La Trobe University School of Agriculture. Welcome, Ewen. Now, Ewen, as someone who's interested in animals, I can report to you that this morning when I went for a run behind my house near Huggins Lookout, it was quite astonishing. I found a here to unknown colony of alpine tree frogs. And I brought them in today as prizes for a quiz we're going to have. I also found, have you ever seen these before? These are alpine koalas, Ewen. Maybe the discovery was made here first. They glow in the dark. So before we start the panel, we'll have just a few quiz questions. Zoe here, her dad represented Australia. In which sport? Oh, excuse me, Jeff? Jeff, someone put their hand up before you. Well done, Dr. Jacinta. What are fossil fuels? Tom. Coal, oil and gas. Why are they causing the planet to warm?
Because they're bad for the planet.
Can you say a bit more? That doesn't deserve a caramello koala.
Because I don't actually know.
Anyone else? Can you take up where the 5-year-old failed? He's my 5-year-old, by the way. I'm allowed to ritually humiliate him. Why are they causing the planet to warm?
Because they increase CO2.
Who was that? Brett? And why does that cause the planet to warm?
Because CO2 retains or prevents heat escaping from the planet.
Woo! Watch me while I throw the koala at you. Well done. When Australia digs up coal, oil and gas and then sends it overseas, does it count towards our national tally? Daisy, no! Next, a question for the true bright locals. Sorry, Mount Beauty folks. On the 31st of May 2021, Dr. Haines here was giving a speech at the Bright Market. What happened next? Oh, so many hands. Sue Joyce.
Bit of dancing?
That was a partial answer. Ellie. Flash mob. Tom?
Gary ripped his shirt.
Gary ripped his shirt off. That was in fact an earlier flash mob. But we'll give him a chocolate. Gary, would you like to do it again?
Maybe later.
Maybe later. What was the song that the flash mob was to? What was the song? Ali, Sue.
Was it I Will Survive?
It was not I Will Survive. Bird Baby Burn! Now that we've got that underway, back to the very serious business of debating climate change. Helen. I volunteer for you. I very much hope you're going to be re-elected. What role will climate play in your decision making should you hold the balance of power?
Straight into the tough ones, hey Lily. Well, thank you. First of all, I need to be re-elected, and I don't for 1 second take that for granted. So my first job is to be re-elected into this magnificent seat of Indi, first order of business. If I am privileged enough to take my seat again on the crossbench in the 48th Parliament, there will be no surprises from me in that from the moment I stepped into the Parliament, I talked about the critical importance of evidence-based policy to address a warming climate. I also talked about and have continued to talk about and continue to legislate, I would say, around the critical role that rural and regional Australia plays in our transition to net zero by 2050. So as I take that position, if I do, and if we have a minority government, you can be absolutely certain I will not be signing any deals with either major party to give them my vote on every piece of legislation that might come through the House. Every piece of legislation that comes through the House will be a point of negotiation for me, and central to my negotiations will be what I have campaigned about since I got there. So climate change action, particularly climate change action that positions rural and regional Australia in a place of strength and resilience and benefit, integrity in politics, ethics, good governance. And finally, my agenda has always been centred around regional development, particularly when it comes to health, mental health, and thriving, prosperous regional economies. And I think that climate change actually comes through each and every one of those platforms. So that's what I'll be doing. It'll be no surprise to you. It's what I've always done. But if there is a minority government, there is an opportunity beyond what we have experienced before to have greater success in achieving what we want to achieve in those policy areas.
Thanks, Helen. Next, Zoe. So you're 17, 18? 17. And you've lived in Mount Beauty most of your life, and you're probably a family that loves snow, given your dad represented Australian cross-country skiing. Thank you, Jacinta. Thank you, Jeff. What changes have you seen in your lifetime in the mountains?
Well, I mean, I'll probably talk to the changes that I've seen through my dad's lifetime and through mine. So my dad, when he was a young athlete, he was competing, you know, in ski resorts all over Victoria and New South Wales, and many of them are no longer functioning. And at Falls Creek, the level of the snow, it keeps rising up and up. If anyone knows where Hellman's Gap is, that used to be a place that had constant snow in the winter. Now you're lucky to get a shower or two every now and again. So for me, it's just seeing the decline in the snow quality and the length of the seasons. So the Kangaroo Hopper, which is the largest cross-country ski race in Australia, it has been running for 33 years. And the last 2 years, it has to be cancelled. It was cancelled due to the lack of snow, and that's the first time that it's ever happened in its history. And you just see, for my sister, she's another cross-country ski athlete. For her, it's hard to train. It's hard to do what she loves. Like, her opportunities are so limited compared to what my dad had. So for me, yeah, the biggest change is just seeing the decline in opportunities to do with snow, and yeah, just seeing our alpine environment slowly decline year after year, and just pretty fearful for what it might look like for the next generation. Can I get a chocolate for that?
Would you like an alpine tree frog or the new species? The new species, good choice.
So we've heard from that, and obviously that's something a lot of us in the audience have seen is that declining snow. Ewen, can you give us any hope though about the alpine environment and how it might turn out to be more resilient than we might expect? Or maybe not.
I'll do my best. Thanks, Lily. And I should mention I'm also a cross-country skier. I ski with Zoe Stable. I can keep up with him, but I still can't really. But I'm trying. So the snow in the Alps is so important for driving ecosystems, for driving recharge of groundwater. We have quite a few snow-dependent ecosystems in the Alps. In fact, given they've had a long history of receiving regular snow for such a long time, for thousands of years, they're all adapted to having a snow cover. So those systems will change under a diminishing snowpack. So the bad news part, and we have to be really clear about this, is that there is less and less snowpack every year, and that snowpack is melting earlier, and so recharge into the groundwater happens at earlier times. And so by the time we get to this time of year, in summer, most of the recharge from the previous winter has started to taper out. And so we're seeing that right now. We're in a particularly dry summer, So that's probably not always the case, but this particular year stream flows have almost diminished down to very little, and that's quite concerning. But we've done a lot in the Alps, and without being too controversial, the Alps right across their extent, so from Victoria through to New South Wales, have a range of other stresses that make it hard for those systems to withstand these diminished snowpack and diminished recharge. And part of that's how we use the land. And so historically we've had fire, we've also had grazing, we've had horses. In parts of the Alps where we've taken away the stresses we can remove, and that's particularly here in this area, so the Bogum High Plains, for example, is one of the highest value alpine terrains in the Alpine National Park. It's doing really well. Its condition is improving at the moment. We're on a trajectory where we actually don't even know what we've got because no one alive has ever seen our Alps in their natural state. Grazing goes back to 1850s, only 1860s. So since that time, there's been those pressures on those ecosystems that we've now taken away. And that removal of those pressures has allowed those systems to recover. So right now, we're in a really, really good phase. Over a longer period of time, clearly we're concerned about what will ever diminishing snowpack do to systems that require that sort of constant annual recharge input of snow, and also during winter, the insulation effect of snow that allows animals to live in subniveal spaces, that gets them through the winter, sort of frost protection. I'm really, really heartened by the idea that if we did something significant to reduce the CO2 levels in the atmosphere, so we acted, there would be a time, and you're absolutely right, there would be a time when these systems could recover. And I think that's the biggest carrot. That it won't necessarily be in my lifetime, but it could be in some of our kids' lifetime. That'd be fantastic. And that, to me, is a target, something we should aim for.
Thanks, Ewan. That's a great... It looks like there's a desperate question in the audience. Madam, stand up, or do you need to go to the toilet? You're allowed to.
What's the subniveal space?
The bit between the...
Oh, hang on, sorry, what was your question?
What's the subniveal space?
What is it?
Can you repeat that? You
Sure.
understood that, I didn't understand.
The space between the snowpack and the ground. So when snow falls initially, it's falling and filling in all the spaces, and then as the snowpack accumulates, you get a void that allows animals movement across the land, and it protects them from really frosty conditions. So it's really critical, actually. So we have in the Alps frost hollows. Everyone will know in the subalpine, frost hollows are a feature. And that's areas where frosting has diminished tree growth. It looks alpine, but it's actually subalpine. But over full winter, those areas are filled in with snow, and it allows animals and plants to be protected from frost.
Did that answer your question?
Fantastic.
Steve, you're a business owner at Mount Hotham, and obviously Ewan's just talked about the impact on the natural environment. In terms of the businesses up at Mount Hotham, what are you seeing businesses doing when they're suffering from the impacts of more changeable seasons, and how are businesses preparing to adapt for less snow in the future?
Thanks, Helen. Good question. Lots of answers, and some that we don't have at the moment. But I guess it's all about small steps for us in relation to things like compostable cups, and up at Mount Hotham we have a very good waste management policy and treatment plant where we take it down the road. We've got our own little tip, and the compostable cups go into composting the waste that we have up there. So a lot of the organic waste and food waste goes in up there, and the compostable cups actually help break that down. So that's one thing that we're doing. The Alpine Resorts Victoria, and I don't speak for Alpine Resorts Victoria or the Mount Hotham Skiing Company, but they're undergoing a strategy at the moment which will go out to public engagement probably later this year, and they've been working very closely with stakeholders to identify what some of the issues are. One of the biggest issues that we have, which you guys may or may not know about, is travelling up the mountain with cars on the road. The emissions that come out of cars is quite significant. So things like carpooling, EV vehicles, making sure that we've got infrastructure for EV vehicles, like charging, things like that are pretty important. I guess, the last couple of years, as you guys would probably know, we've had shorter seasons where we've actually shut, the season early, and that's because of, lack of snow, which is no good for anybody. It's no good for the visitor experience. Obviously no good for businesses. We only have about a 16-week period to make things viable, and the last couple of years, have been pretty much unviable for a lot of businesses on the mountain. So we all need to work together, and this is where Alpine Resorts Victoria have come about to put this whole sustainability piece together, working with stakeholders at each resort, not just Mount Hotham, but right throughout the state, identifying the local issues, because some local issues are a little bit different from what we have. EV transport around the village. We've got buses that run all day around the village for our guests, and things like electrifying those buses, making sure the battery technology is up for that, because obviously it gets pretty cold. We had an event a couple of weeks ago up at Mount Hotham, and out of all the days, it ended up being -7. And you sort of sit there and go, oh gee, we've put all this effort in, people are going to have a great time, and then we're snowing. So we are seeing more extremes up there as well. So what I've seen in my 18 winters, and also now living at Dinner Plain as of about 4 years ago, it seems to be more extremes. So when it rains more. When it snows, actually we get more snow, but there's less of it in terms of the frequency. So, I guess it's all about working together, developing these policies. State government's now responsible for developing these policies under Alpine Resorts Victoria. So that's a conglomerate of all the resorts that are now sitting under one board, as opposed to having separate boards. So all this sort of thing has been mandated by the Minister, and working towards all that.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to interrupt you there because you brought up a really good point about more extremes. And I'd like to ask Ewen about what people who love the mountains, is there anything that people who love the mountains can do to help with these extremes, or in any way to protect the alpine environment? What can we do?
I think the things we can do, or we can do more generally, they're not necessarily alpine specific, but acting individually to decrease our footprint. I was thinking converting our light vehicle fleet in the country to EVs would be the thing we need to do. Probably everyone in this room would like to have an EV, but a lot of us can't actually get into that just yet. So these are the changes we need to make, and I'm not sure that I could tell you there's something you could do that would change the extremes that we're going to get. They've always been predicted. That's not a surprise. And I guess one of the things about climate change is something fantastic. You went through the science of climate change. It's that all the physics and the chemistry is completely understood. There's no doubt about it. What the issues have always been is about projection of future modelling. But we're now in a time where we were modelled. We've been modelled to this point, and the models have been fantastic. And it was always predicted we would get more extreme events. We get less winter snowpack and we get more thunderstorms. We're shifting the precipitation patterns, and that's what has happened. We're getting higher temperatures in the Alps, and that's what's happened. So I think from a science point of view, I think it's really reassuring that enough effort's been put in to understanding what the impacts might be, and we actually are on the money. It's right. So we need to trust it.
Thanks, Ewen. Zoe, how much hope do you have that, so Ewen just said we've predicted this all, we know what to do. I guess the missing ingredient is doing it. Do you have anything to say to the adults in the room? Will you be voting for the first time at this federal election? When's your birthday? Oh, Helen, can we delay the election? Do you have a message?
Excuse me for a moment while I ring the Prime
Do you have a message for... So we all talk about individual responsibility a lot, and we all can do our bit. We can compost, we can drive an EV if we can afford one. But at the end of the day, most of the action has to happen at a governmental and company level. Companies need to reduce emissions. We need to stop. The biggest thing in Australia we need to do is stop digging up fossil fuels. That has to come from the governments. the governments of Australia. Do you have a message for them, Zoe? It's your future more than theirs.
Yes, I definitely do have a message for them. I think that many of them do not understand how important our snow and our alpine environments are to so many of our people. You know, from industries to just enjoyment, like it's a very, very important part of many of our lives, and it's at risk. And so for so many different people, that means so many different things, and just it's so vital that we protect these environments. And while, you know, some members of the government, it may not be a priority for them because they may not have experienced how incredible it is and how special it is. But they need to understand that, you know, having an alpine environment and having the opportunity to ski and do snow sports and enjoy the environment is such an important opportunity for the people of Australia. And it's very, very special, and they really need to understand how just incredible it is, and that it really should be their priority, and that I'm quite scared. I'm quite scared that as I grow up, and if, you know, I ever have children, that they will not be able to experience the snow, because I know that from my dad's generation to mine, you know, his experience of the snow compared to mine, like it's completely been diminished. And so yeah, I'm fearful for how much worse it's going to be for the next generations if we do not act, and we need to. Yeah.
Thanks, Zoe, that's a great answer. I'm going to throw to you, Helen, for the next question, which is, so this event is brought to you by POW Australia, great acronym, Protect Our Winters. And POW has a lot of very dedicated volunteers throughout the country, particularly in the major cities. What advice would you give POW and people who want to protect our winters, who live in the cities? How can their voice be best heard in the upcoming election?
Yeah, thanks, Lily. Well, I mean, vote independent might be one way. I have to get that plug in, of course. But can I just, before I answer that in total, just reflect on the discussion we've just had about what can we all do? And when we're thinking about what can we do to influence government around the kind of policies that will make a difference to the impact of climate change, and Lily, you mentioned to stop digging up fossil fuels, so that's one. So no new coal and gas developments, and you know, you have a voice around that. You have a big voice. And there are many campaigns that roll around. I get thousands of emails into my inbox about these things. So join those campaigns, demand that government does not do that. We have sufficient gas in our system right now for that period as we transition away from the other fossil fuels, because it's one fossil fuel, of course, into full electrification. Electrification in and of itself is something to be demanding. And here in our area, we've got the Sustainable Ovens group. Any of you here? I reckon there's probably a few people in that group. Yeah, there's Brian. I've been putting private members' bills before the Parliament since I got there around government support of home electrification to assist people in getting solar, batteries and electric appliances in their homes, so that we can have cheaper power by generating and storing our own, that we have the kind of appliances in our homes that actually make us more comfortable than some of the older technologies, and ultimately that we save money in our weekly household budget by being fully electrified. So again, I think there's some real movement on this from the two major parties. I've heard on the drums this morning that there's going to be a significant announcement from the federal government around support for home electrification. You can be sure that the coalition, who seems to be saying me too, will do a me too. I mean, that's good news for us, right? Like if we are pushing these policies, and certainly me as an independent and my colleague, Senator Pocock in the Senate, the major parties are starting to listen on this, and they're listening because they are seeing people move away from voting one for a major party. 30% of all primary votes did not go to major parties last time. They went to independents and micro parties. So your voice and your vote has a really, really big impact. which then you actually asked me another question which I've now forgotten.
I forgot that too. But I was going to ask
Oh,
them.
what can Protect Our Winters
Yeah.
and other groups do? You keep doing what you are doing. You reach out to MPs, and exactly what you did when Sam and Scott and the crew came to me in Parliament and said, Helen, we want to talk to you about this. Use your Member of Parliament as your advocate in the Parliament, and then I think it's gathering more people into your fold and upping the advocacy. As Lily said, we're in a federal election campaign. I get lots of emails asking me to respond to questions about particular issues. You could send that out to all MPs saying, what are you going to do to protect our winters? Many people won't reply. That probably tells you something. Some people will reply. You can push that out in your social media campaigns and other work that you do around assisting voters who want to be informed when they go to the ballot box. Just what are the people whose names are on that ballot? What do they actually stand for? And do they care about the issues that you care about, such as protecting our winters? So I think that's what I would be advising you to do. And a lot of young people are pretty good actually at understanding how to campaign, but demand of anybody who puts their name on a ballot paper their attitudes, policies and what actions they're going to do to protect our climate. Demand that of them. They should answer that question.
Thanks, Helen. That's a good answer. I'd also add something a climate science communicator told me recently, which is that even amongst those people who want climate action, we don't talk about it enough. He said one of the main things is you just have to include the words climate change in a conversation every day, even if it makes you uncomfortable. I make a point every time I sit next to someone on a chairlift of talking about climate change with them. It makes me very uncomfortable. Sometimes you get a bit of pushback, but you have to have those awkward conversations if you want action. Okay, we're going to interrupt the proceedings for the rest of the quiz, the moments you've all been waiting for. Now, you panellists can also answer these quiz questions as well. In what year did the orchard chair open at Mount Hotham? Kira, you look like you were party to putting the questions together when you put your hand up before I even finish. What year, Kira?
1997.
She gave me the answer, so unless anyone's going to tell her she's wrong, she gets one. Sorry, Gus. Sorry, Gus. Is she correct? Carly? Okay, great. There's no one to say she isn't, so she gets it. Second question in this next batch. What is the mascot of the... Remind me, Kira, what's the name? The Resilient Alpine Youth Squad. Rays. You're a little ray of hope, Kira. What is the mascot of the Resilient Alpine Youth Squad? Kira, you're banned from answering this question. Fox.
A phoenix.
It's a phoenix! Shivers, sorry. My aim was better at the start, I think. What was the One Tree Hill ski run originally called? Bonus points for where it is and when you last skied it. Pip? No idea. Sue? No, Kira. Jess? Well, I think we're going to give you one because you were brave enough to answer. But no, Kira tells me it was called Soft Touch and it was a blue run. Soft Touch. Soft Touch. I'm a soft touch because I gave you a chocolate even when you didn't get it correct. Okay. Steve, what is the vibe up at Hotham when a season doesn't go well?
Honestly, not good. Yeah, no, it's not good for everybody, not just up at Hotham, but obviously all the satellite towns as well, because you guys, support us with food and beverage and accommodation, and also, all the little mini tourist information centres that, pass on what's going on at the mountain and things like that. So it has a mental health component to it. So, you look at the COVID season of 2020 where, we had lifts shut down after 4 days, and we're still trying to recover from that. And then we had, 2022 we were all let out and people were everywhere. And we're still trying to recover from that too, because we had obviously had staffing issues through that. So I guess, you know, it's really all about trying to work together, and when there are, you know, bad seasons, and they do happen, it's a cyclic thing as well. It's not just climate change. If you look at all the history, we have had bad seasons before, and we'll continue to have them as well. But we're all hoping for a good season this year. We're due for one. But I guess it's the messaging as well. You know, it's the management of the snow and the technology of managing the snow with snowmaking, and also moving some snow around. It doesn't look pretty sometimes, but to keep some runs open and keep people coming through the doors is good for all of us, and it promotes investment into the mountains. If we don't have people coming, we don't have investment. So some of the climate change initiatives that we're trying to do, we can't do unless we've got people on the ground. So, you know, it's about adapting as well. Some of the businesses have changed some of the ways that they're working, some of the offerings that they're doing. They've moved some of their operations around to different areas of the mountain to try and ensure that, you know, when we do have an ordinary season, that we've still got snow on the ground to be able to operate. You know, we're talking a little bit about the kangaroo hopper. You can't move something like that. But you might be able to move a ski school, you know, to a higher level. And there's always good and bad in that, and you can sit here until the cows come home, and there'll be people who are saying it's a fantastic idea, and there'll be people saying it's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. So it's about just trying to work together and getting the communications right when we do have, you know, a season that's not fantastic. Snowmaking has really improved over the years, both, you know, in terms of the power it takes and the resource in terms of water as well, making sure that we're not, you know, wasting water. And I mean, it eventually all comes back into the river again anyway and gets reused most of the time. You know, just making sure that we manage that properly across the resorts.
Thanks, Steve.
A question for the audience, and I'll encourage all people to ask questions from the audience, and I only have a limited amount of chocolate frogs and caramello koalas left, so get your question in while I've got one.
Okay, I was just going to ask, given that we all know where we are heading in the climate, unfortunately, and the likelihood of it turning around by 2070, I think we're probably pretty minimal. I hope that's not the case. But how much are the resorts actually looking at changing their business to summer businesses, where you're not so reliant on winter, and perhaps even cutting back on some of the alpine skiing activities, given that it does take a fair bit of energy to keep them operating. And we also know that alpine skiing is a very elite pastime and recreation pursuit, and I think it's really only benefits a very small number of the population.
Can I take the moderator's privilege and throw that answer to Ewen?
Sure, thanks. Actually, what was the question again?
I'll jump in after he's finished.
Sorry.
It was around adapting to summer. If we have more tourists in the alpine resorts in summer, and whether that presents any risks, and also,
No, I didn't ask about
Okay,
summer
sorry.
risks. I was asking about, I was reducing the
How much energy it takes
to recreation.
Yeah, okay. A few things come to mind. The way, you know, ARV released a report 2 weeks ago about how they see their future, and they still see that as being winter dominated. That's where the major part of their business will be, and I think it recognises that while summer use of the Alps will increase, people don't tend to go there for summer, they go there for winter. That's where the bigger numbers are. And that's, ultimately, if there is no reliable snow, then winter skiing will clearly cease. I think we're a while off from that point, and the report that they released goes into how they can work around the diminishing snowpack, and it's clearly doing the things they are doing now, and trying to groom so you can have snow in winter, so you groom to allow the lesser snowpack to still be usable. Snowmaking, obviously, but you are fighting a bit of a losing battle. The summer visitation, there's so many things you can do in the Alps in summer. It's a fantastic place, and that will grow, but I don't see it being as big as winter use of the Alps. That's not where we're at. I was just going to follow up on what Steve was saying before about the bad years. And because I think most of us are local, Sunday afternoon, I assume everyone here lives here or Mount Beauty or somewhere in Myrtleford. For me, living in Mount Beauty, it's become so apparent how linked the resorts are to their town. So Falls Creek, Mount Beauty is one place, separated by 30 kilometres of windy road, but they depend on each other. And I think the same would apply for Hotham and Bright. And if there's a diminished economic activity in the resorts, it will actually affect the valleys. And we need to be really all aware of that.
Thanks, Ewan. We have another question from the front.
What's the best resort in Victoria?
Great question, Tom. Yeah, I think, is that why you asked the question? Okay, right. It's off touch. We have another question?
All right. What we obviously know the risks of those lower elevation resorts is really high. What are your thoughts on what's going on around Mount Ball? If there's, I know it's very centric around Hotham at the moment, but we do have another resort on the other side that's closer to Melbourne and is pretty cost effective for skiing. What are your thoughts around Mount Ball's current snow elevation risks?
I think you're the most qualified to answer that question. Yep.
Okay, I'll answer as a snow person. So Ball has a slightly different climate, so it's more maritime. So the way it gets its snow is a little different to how Hotham and Falls Creek get their snow. Traditionally, I mean, historically, that's how it's gone. Clearly lower elevation, but more south. So I feel like the tree line follows with the latitude. So as you go more south, you can be lower elevation and still get a reasonably good snowy year. I mean, I still think Ball was under the same pressure that we are here, and we'll have the same mitigation things it can do to make the resort have a longer lifetime. But ultimately, we're all in the same climate. No one lives in a bubble, so every resort is in the same changing climate. And I think relatively, they all lose snow over time. We know that. And I think Zoe alluded to how much things have changed at Mount Buffalo. They used to have 2 lifted areas and now has none, and you couldn't do it. So that's the change that's happened here. And I think we can probably expect that ultimately everywhere. That'll happen before the 2070 magic date when we can return back to normal. And return back to normal will take more than a year anyway. So.
Yeah, thanks, Ewan. Also, you know, with Mount Ball and Lake Mountain, obviously the altitude is not as high, but the power over there is not really sustainable moving forward. And I say that because they're all running off diesel generators at the moment. So I think some was gas to start with. I think they're converting the generator across from Ball from gas to diesel, which doesn't sound like it's more efficient, but it actually is in terms of dollars. Those resorts have run at a loss over many years and have been propped up by the government. Now that we're all sitting in this one conglomerate under Alpine Resorts Victoria, you'll see some changes that were made last year to try and reduce some of the costs, to try and make it more sustainable to run and also more economically able to run under its current I guess, situation. So, you know, you may have seen both those resorts have been tendered out for operations by third parties, and I'm not sure what the result of that has been as yet, but some of the biggest issues are power there.
Thanks, Steve. Helen.
I just wanted to go back to this woman in the front. What was your name?
Jill.
Jill, thank you. Beautiful. You could see Jill and gentleman sitting beside Jill have got beautiful Snow Gum Summit t-shirts. Yeah, they are beautiful. But a couple of things I just wanted to add to this conversation, because we're talking a little bit here about what does the regional economy in an alpine area such as ours look like with a warming climate. And one of the glaring gaps that I became aware of when I came to Parliament was that the alpine resorts were not eligible for any of the Commonwealth regional grants, not eligible at all. I tried very hard to fix that when I was in the 46th Parliament. That was the Parliament led by Mr Morrison as Prime Minister. And I came close to persuading Barnaby Joyce, who was then the responsible Minister for Regional Development, to change the rule, but he didn't. So I went to the new Infrastructure and Regional Development Minister, Catherine King, when the government changed. We got that fixed within 2 weeks, which made the Alpine Resorts eligible to apply for some of these big grants. Now, why does this matter? This matters because it gives the Alpine Resorts the opportunity to seek investment in alternative energy resourcing to run the resorts. It gives them the opportunity to have summer offerings with really good infrastructure to assist people to get out there bushwalking and understanding the ecology in the summer environment, to get to know the Alps. So to your point that, that downhill skiing is not for everyone, bushwalking can be. And a huge shout out to the cross-country skiers because, because the maintenance of those trails and ensuring that we've got options for people who want to get out cross-country skiing is again something that takes a fair bit of investment, and the returns on investment from the cross-country skiing community, I know the downhill skiing community often say that they might be subsidising that through the money that comes that way. So I'm really proud of that we now have our Alpine Resorts into the mix. The other thing that enabled us to do, and Steve and I became friends, we got to know each other through the Black Summer bushfires and the extraordinarily devastating impact of those bushfires in this region. None of you will forget. I continue to talk about them in the Parliament because it's amazing how quickly the nation forgets. But our capacity to generate funding through bushfire recovery into the Alpine area has been very, very significant and has given us different ways to fund and think about the offer that we can have, both within winter and outside of winter. And I won't for one moment underestimate the impact on our communities, on our little towns, if on tourism, if we're not serious about addressing climate change and adapting. Because we have to adapt in the Alpine areas.
Thanks, Helen. And I would say for anyone who thinks that your region doesn't get to have a say if you're not represented by one of the major parties, particularly the major party in power, I would point to that very specific example that Helen just gave, that a hard-working independent gets a lot of stuff done, and Helen has certainly got a huge amount done in her terms. Thank you, Helen. Now, my son down here wants to ask another question. I suspect it's just because he wants another caramello koala, so I'm going to ask a question on his behalf. Zoe, my son Tom here talks... I'll give you another one, darling. No, you've got 4. Jesus. Zoe, my son Tom here loves skiing, I think it's fair to say, and talks about how he's going to move to Canada when he grows up because he's heard that's where the skiing is good. As his mum, that makes me very, very sad. Are you also seeing some of that impact amongst your peer group?
Yeah, so my sister, she's also a cross-country ski athlete like my dad. And so she's, in that whole community with all of the cross-country ski athletes, and so many of them are needing to move overseas. One of her closest friends just moved overseas. And so for my sister Hannah, that means, she loses some of her ski friends and she doesn't quite have the same community. It also means for me, potentially my sister might move overseas, which is quite heartbreaking a little bit. Exciting for her maybe, but I think it definitely, it means families can't be together. It means that our cross-country ski community is no longer centred in Australia, it's spread out all over the world. And I think it's pretty heartbreaking that our cross-country ski athletes it's very difficult to be able to compete with any other country because they just do not have the opportunity to train on the snow. And so moving overseas it's for some people it's the only option, especially for athletes in Melbourne, with all of the close ski resorts closing for them. And no longer providing cross-country ski trails. So for cross-country ski athletes, and also I'm sure athletes in all other sports, you know, snowboarding and downhill skiing and all of those, yeah, it's definitely a very big trend, is that lots of them are moving overseas, leaving their families, and yeah, diminishing our snow community.
Very well said, Zoe. Now we've got time for a few more questions. I'm ignoring the hand in the front. Dr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Dr. O'Neill. My question is, I feel like this has been a really beautiful educational opportunity, and I can see that for the youth that are currently playing noisily in the background here, that this is also their opportunity for learning. Are there any resources out there that might help children to learn about climate?
Are there, Dr. O'Neill?
Yes, there are. Go on.
So some of the local kids have been asking questions about climate change, and at my work we have put out some videos called Climate Kids that answers their questions. Which brings me to my last quiz question. Who thinks his boys had too much chocolate already? What was the name of the person who first raised the prospect of the world warming because of fossil fuel use? What was this person's name?
Frosty the Snowman.
Babao. Anyone? Anyone? Was this person a man or a woman? I'm going to give a chocolate to the answer. Was this person a man or a woman? Woman. You could kind of guess that, couldn't you? Her name was Eunice Foote. Have any of us heard of her? The moral of that question is, do you know what the moral is? Listen to women.
When was it?
In 1850 something or other, maybe later. I could be wrong. Thanks, Scott. We've got time for maybe one or two more questions. We've got a question down there from Alex. Alex. Did you know about her, Alex? Fantastic. Okay, I think you might be lying. Any other questions from the audience, or shall I? Yes, great.
I was just wondering if there was a really bit of a longer term plan for some of the infrastructure, like what happens if the snowland does rise above the bottom of the sea ice? What are we going to do with it?
Very good question. I don't have all the answers. But I guess, it comes back to summer activation as well, which, was mentioned. We find it very difficult to get people up the mountain in summer. We had a festival a couple of weeks ago that was supported by DECA and also the Chamber of Commerce. The weather wasn't fantastic, which worked against us, but the amount of, marketing, radio, paper, all the stuff that we did to get probably 100 people up the mountain was pretty hard. And I was at festival yesterday. I don't know if any of you guys made it up there. Really good event too. Was down on numbers from previous years. A lot of work goes in, and when you come through Bright, Myrtleford, Mount Beauty, and you see people everywhere, and some of the locals going, "Oh, geez, it's another event, and we can't go shopping, and is it good for the town? Is it not good for the town?" You can argue that till the cows come home, but gee, we'd love to see somebody up at the mountain. So I guess it's trying to spread the load. Every so often government will come up and go, "Guys, we need to activate the green season. Here's a few $100,000, can you work with us and we'll get some events going?" And we do that, and then we have not great success in getting people from the mountains. But when you come down here and you see everyone down here and it's sort of busting at the seam, you sort of go, "Geez, what can we do?" And we have done some things where we've tried to work with other business chambers around, and I've called it the top to tail effect, where we say, "Well, come up the mountain for a couple of days, we'll give you a good deal, 2 for 1 or 50% off, or here's a voucher for a restaurant." And it goes out to the database, and I'll mention La Fiera. We did a deal with them last year, and we did not get one person up, which was completely incredible from my point of view. So I guess it's something we all need to work on and just say, hey, we do have some great things up at Hotham and Falls Creek in this area. You know, escape the heat, come up, spend some time. You know, businesses will open if there's people that come up, and we have this, you know, circular effect where people go, well, I'm not opening because it's going to cost me too much. And people go, well, I'm not coming because nothing open. So we sort of have to work together and try and spread that out. In terms of infrastructure, you know, good question, probably not the right person to ask. I mean, that really goes down to our lift companies. But I know that they're starting to move some of the smaller lifts around to try and make it a little bit more resilient for people, particularly first timers. So that's something that's happening, and just improving on snowmaking and snow management really at this stage.
Thanks, Steve. Helen, did you want to add to that?
Actually, I can see Marcus over there. We had a conversation just a few days ago around the vision, bright vision, from the Chamber of Commerce, and incredible work done. I don't want to put you on the spot, Marcus, but if you were wanting to comment, it might be very helpful. But one of the key take-homes for me was around connecting our communities to the alpine resorts and more broadly understanding what our overall offer is. I think what Steve talks about in getting people up to the mountains speaks to key gaps, not just here, but right across rural and regional Australia around transport. There's also gaps when it comes to digital connectivity. Huge challenge here, and it'll be every hand in the room would go up when we talk about the impact of large numbers of visitors arriving in a small town like Bright on a weekend and what impact that has on our capacity to use an EFTPOS machine, make a telephone call, send an SMS, whatever that might be. So I think that overall I'm a loud and annoying voice in the Parliament around continuing to increase investment into things like our roads, our digital connectivity, our health and education resources, all of the things that it takes to run a community. We need to see stronger investment from Commonwealth and state governments. I think with that broader infrastructure piece, you can't just do things on the mountain. You've got to do things around the mountain as well in order for people to come 4 seasons.
Thanks, Helen. I've got a genuine, very quick question here that I think no one will be able to answer.
How many gallons of fossil fuels does Hotham burn a year?
No idea. But we will have an idea once the climate starts.
Probably there's a lot of room for improvement. Good question, Tom. No more chocolate frogs. Last question, or if anyone else has a burning question, and then we're going to hear a little bit about the panel that's happening at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, sorry to take the last question, but Helen, when you first opened your presentation, you talked about snow guns, about how iconic they are and important they are to the environment. And as you know, our snow gum ecosystems are at risk of collapse at the moment, largely due to climate change, and particularly frequent fires and ecological imbalances from beetles and things like that, so we really are about to lose an icon. And indeed, next to that, our alpine ash forests, too frequently burnt, and our peatlands, too frequently burnt, as Ewen well knows. This is a national issue. It affects right through the Australian Alps, not just Victoria. And of course, our Australian Alps are national heritage, and the Environment Minister has listed the Australian Alps as one of 8 Australian mainland special priority areas, I understand. So I just wondered if we can get some federal government interest into, we need to know more about this, we need some good research, we need to get some activity going to just not watch these ecosystems collapse under climate change.
Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Peter's in disguise here behind his dark glasses. We're all friends here. Look, it's a really great question. I'm going to take you straight to the struggles we're having in the federal parliament, where we cannot even legislate improvements to the EPBC Act. We cannot get robust nature repair laws passed through our parliament, and indeed we've just seen the government walk away from what were, I think, pretty weak improvements to establishing a national EPA. So, look, as someone who really deeply cares about this, I'm really struggling in the Parliament to try and push forward with this agenda, but we need wholesale review of our Environmental Protection and Conservation Act, and we don't have a government brave enough to do it. They're getting pushback from the Western Australian gas lobby, and that's really the nub of it. I think maybe Ewen could speak to the research component of this, but you're quite right. Like we have governments talking out both sides of their mouths on this. It's one thing to establish a heritage area and talk about iconic snow gums, but at the same time not pass any improvements to our Environmental Protection Act. So I'm going to continue to add my voice to that campaign in the federal parliament. I know many of my colleagues on the crossbench do as well. The laws that we had in front of us were pretty weak actually and missing many components. They were sent across to the Senate. Key crossbenchers there tried to strengthen them. There was some good negotiations done, I understand, but then the whole thing has been pulled, and we'll go to the election with still the weakest environmental protection laws of many like countries in the world. So and that's not good news for you, but or any of us actually, but that's where we sit. So again, I would say to you as voters, make that an election issue too, that we pass strong environment protection laws, nature repair laws, that we have integrity in things like carbon credits. We've got a safeguard mechanism legislated in the Parliament, which in many ways gives a free pass to large emitters provided they purchase carbon credits, and we know that the integrity of those carbon credits in many situations is not as it should. So we have to demand more, we really do, and vote that way. Do you want to talk on the research angle?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to. I've got to talk about this tonight, actually. It's good practice. The snow gum story is quite amazing. The extent of snow gums that have not burnt since 1939 is minute. A small part of Mount Buffalo, a small part on Mount Buller, a small part in the Eastern Alps. All other snow gum stands have burnt once or more since that time. And while snow gums have the capacity to respond and regrow from fire, they have a limited capacity to do that. And so their tolerance for frequent burns is not as high as we might imagine. And they are an iconic alpine species. So it's something that's really pressing at the moment to understand what the risks are. I guess I was going to go back to what Jill asked before about green season and summer and winter use in the Alps. And just to reflect on the reason we've got national park is around what's called natural values. And the natural values are the ecosystems that are there, and they're really only apparent in the green season. So one of the opportunities for the resorts is to operate as a node for summer visitation in the Alps. So we have people out there who are seeing what the natural values actually are while we have a park. One of the tendencies we have is to think of our mountains being insignificant because they're not as high, but they're internationally significant. They're soil mountains, they're entirely vegetated, and that's how they should be. The only reason they're stable is to have vegetation cover. And no other mountain system in the world is like them. And we really should respect them and think of them as being internationally significant.
Thanks, Ewen. You're welcome to ask one more question. I would also just like, from my own work, to point out why independence is so important in Parliament. In the last year, there was a bill that came before Parliament that was called something like Offshore Workers' Rights and Safety. Helen's laughing because buried deep within the 500, 600 pages was a key power move to take all approvals over offshore oil and gas away from the Environment Minister and give it to the Resources Minister. And that's where independents like you, Helen, really play, such a vital role, is holding, in the old Democrats' words, those bastards to account.
Can I just, I can actually share with you the moment when that bill, as independents, this current government brief us every week when Parliament is on, the ministers responsible for new legislation, come into a room and all the crossbench show up and they give us like a pretty rapid but a briefing on the legislation they're wishing to introduce to the House. And this bill came up and literally, I mean, you're right, Lily, like this is a really big bill.
Like a doorstopper.
Yeah, it is a doorstopper. So we don't get the whole bill there, but we kind of get a one-pager and a bit of information. And then the crossbench ask the ministers questions, and some of the ministers actually are very nervous when they have to do the crossbench briefing. Don't know why, but anyway, they are. Anyway, this bill came down, and I did this rapid scan, and I saw that bit, and I also saw another bit around sea dumping. And so I just asked exactly that question. So, you know, you're going to hand all this power over to the resources minister. Says the minister responsible. Oh, look, you know, no need to worry about that. Look, it's all good. This is all a safeguard. It's all going to be fine. We then, of course, took that away collectively as a group and sought lots of expert opinion from civil society groups, from anyone who would know anything about this, and spoke robustly against this in the House of Reps and opposed that bill, and really blew the whistle on what was trying to be achieved there. Yeah.
It's terrific work.
Yeah, and it finally we finally fixed it over in the Senate. Yeah. So I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah.
It was very much a task to improve that bill. Last question, and then Hannah is going to introduce the next session.
I guess my question is around skiing generally as being quite a resource-intensive activity, and you know, when I do go up the mountain, I see a lot of cars going up, and they're not all full, and I do wonder sometimes whether the ski community and is really focusing on sort of actual things that we could do to make a visible show of trying to be more or less resource intensive, maybe carpooling, maybe you know, it just seems to me that build more car parks, put more apartments up, but don't actually look at our behaviour on the mountains. So I'm wondering if anyone's got.
And I'll give the answer to Ali, who's one of the directors on POWfest. It's a very good question, but it raises the big question about our own personal role in this. And I certainly know we all feel like hypocrites at various times when Mick Bennett, you go heli skiing in New Zealand, for example. But I guess the bigger answer is, Mick Bennett is my husband, by the way. The bigger point about that, and about when fingers get pointed at individuals for not doing their bit, now when we point our fingers at people like Donald Trump or Elon Musk, that's very justified, is what it does, it distracts us from where the actual power to make a difference on this problem lies. And the actual power rests with governments. Having said that, let's hear from Power about what they're doing about it.
So thank you so much for bringing that up. We actually have a tool on our website, I believe it's available to the public, Sam will be able to confirm that, where you can list, I'm going up or I'm looking for a lift, and we're trying to actively encourage people to carpool wherever possible. Obviously, Helen's spoken to need to increase our public transport options would also make a massive difference to the footprint, and Steve talked to that as well. So it's absolutely something that's on our minds as a group of passionate mountain lovers and skiers, and I encourage everybody to consider that. That's a really simple thing that we could do to reduce our impact.
Thanks, Ali. And look, at POW, we're genuinely trying to be more than just shifting the chairs on the Titanic, right, as it sinks. So, but that's a very fair question and really points to, I guess, some of the hypocrisies at the heart of what we're talking about. But again, I will say, those are questions that people who don't, this is not you, madam, of course, but those are questions that get pointed at us and accusations that get pointed at us from people who don't want action on climate change. Always ask, where does the real power lie to make a difference in this? Okay, I'd like to thank the panel. Shut up, Tom. I'd like to thank the panel. Ewen, Helen, Steve and Zoe, thank you so much. Special thanks to Zoe, didn't she do a stand-up job? Thank you very much.